கண்டு விசுவாசிக்கிறவனா ஒரு விசுவாசம் பவுல் காணவே இல்லைங்க. லாஸ்ட் டைம் அவங்க வந்து பேசிட்டு போனாங்க, உயிர்த்தெழுதலை கண்டது யார்? பேதுரு தானே அப்படின்ட்டு. ஆனா இவர் என்ன சொல்றாரு? கண்டு விசுவாசிக்கிறவன் ஒரு பெரிய விசுவாசி அல்ல, காணாமல் விசுவாசிச்சாரே பவுல், அதுதானே பெரிய விசுவாசம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு. அதே மாதிரி சுகமளிக்கும் வல்லமை குறித்து அவர் பேசுறாரு. பேதுரு அங்க வந்து அவரோட நிழல் பட்டாதான் சுகம், ஆனா பவுலோட கர்ச்சீஃப் பட்டாலே சுகம். ரொம்ப ஒரு அழகான விஷயத்த ஒண்ணு கடைசியா சொன்னாரு. ரோலர் கோஸ்டர் ரைடுக்கு போக பால் ரெடிங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லி சொன்னாரு. அப்ப ரோலர் கோஸ்டர் சொன்னா நம்ம ஊர் ராட்டனம் தான் ஞாபகம் இருக்கு. நம்ம ஊர் பக்கம் திருவிழால கொலம்பஸ் விட்டாங்க. அந்த கொலம்பஸ்னா கொலம்பஸ் படம் கப்பல் மாதிரி இருந்து இப்படி ஆடிட்டு இருக்கோம் ராட்டனம். பசங்க தான் இன்னும் வேகம்னு கத்துல அந்த கொலம்பஸ் கப்பல் பிடிச்சிட்டு பக்கத்துல இருந்த ஆத்துல சுத்திட்டு. இந்த மாதிரி தான் நம்ம ஊர்ல சேஃப்டி. அதே மாதிரி ராட்டனம் சுத்துற இடத்துல அப்படியே ராட்டினம் மாதிரி அந்த திருவிழாவே ஒரு ரவுண்ட் வரும். அந்த மாதிரி விஷயங்கள் அங்க நடக்குது. ஆனால் இப்படிப்பட்ட ஒரு சேஃப்டியே இல்லாத இடத்துலயும் பவுல் ஒரு வைராக்கியமா ஆண்டவர் மேல வச்ச விசுவாசத்தை காப்பாத்தினாரு. இதுக்கெல்லாம் எதிர்த்தையும் பதில் சொல்லி ஆகும். ஆனால் பதில் சொல்றதுக்கு சரியான ஆளா இவர்களார் எரி.
Bonjour, everybody. Peter, the rock. The Hebrew name Peter, also known as the rock, comes from the ancient name. The scientific definition is, okay, sorry, I don't want to make you mad. Well, basically rock. Jesus named Simon Peter as safest at his first instance of meeting him. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, "You are Simon the son of Jonah. You shall be called Satan," which is translated a stone. Peter recognized Jesus' messiahship from the very beginning, and that Jesus had seen Simon as the rock from their first meeting. Later on, Jesus makes a powerful statement of Peter in Matthew 16. "And I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overpower it." Well, I don't want to make you mad or anything, but what he meant is that he was the foundation of the church. The rock that Jesus is referring to is his first disciple, Peter, which is the Hebrew name for rock. Peter is the foundation of the church. Why? Because he was the first person to make the confession of faith, which is a requirement for any person to become a member of the body of Jesus Christ, biblically speaking. He responds to Jesus' question of, "Who do you say that I am?" by saying, "You are the Christ, the only Son of the living God." The rock on which Christ would build his church would be the truth to which Peter confessed, that Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus didn't respond by saying, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood had not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." This is Jesus saying that Simon is blessed, because it wasn't flesh and blood that revealed it that Jesus is God's Son, but it's God himself that revealed it to him from heaven. Pretty cool, right? Jesus also grants him the road by saying, "Don't think it's a treasure just filled with $1 billion of gold, okay? And I shall give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound on in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." That's a pretty big goal up there. Peter was given the power to proclaim the terms of forgiveness. He opened the door of salvation to the Jews on the day of Pentecost in Acts 2, and later to the Gentiles in Acts 10. Here are some important notes about Peter, formerly Simon Bar-Jonah. Peter's real name was Simon. The definition for Simon is that Simon is the English version of the Hebrew name Shamu. Shamu comes from the Hebrew word Shamu, which means to listen or hear and obey. Don't get mad, I'm just explaining some name. These points start to reveal that Peter is the chosen one to start the movement, and is the indestructible foundation in which the church stands on. One last paragraph. Don't get your eggs and tomatoes aiming at me. Peter was also the first to preach the gospel to a Gentile known as Cornelius. Hey, it's Peter's little brother, but it isn't in the book. Peter, as we all know, denied Jesus 3 times, but that was predicted by Jesus when Peter said, "I will go to jail with you and die with you." This is why Peter was chosen to be the indestructible foundation of the church, just because of his loyalty towards Jesus Christ. Don't get angry yet, I'm just going to conclude with one last sentence. Remember that Peter may not run with rocks, but Paul runs with smalls. Thank you.
இங்க அருமையா பேசுறாங்க, இங்கேயும் அருமையா பேசுறாங்கன்னு சொல்லிட்டு போயிருவேன். 3 ஜட்ஜஸை பார்த்தா எனக்கு பாவமா இருக்கு. எப்படி அருமையான ஒரு பாயிண்ட் வச்சான். பில்டிங் ஸ்ட்ராங்கா இருந்து என்ன பிரயோஜனம்? பேஸ்மெண்ட் வீக்கா இருந்துச்சுன்னா உளுந்துரும்பா. எங்கால் ராக்கு மாதிரி. இன்னைக்கு நீங்க சபைன்னு சொல்றீங்களே, இத்தனை சபைக்கும் ஒரு பேஸ்மெண்ட் யாரு? பீட்டர் தானே அப்படின்றாரு. எப்படி இதுக்கெல்லாம் ஸ்ட்ராங்கா பதில் சொல்லி ஆகணும். ஜெரிஷா வேலைக்கு
continuously throughout your speech that Peter is the foundation. But I would like to ask, is foundation alone enough? What about the building and completing the house? That is what Paul Hello everyone, I'm here to explain why Paul is greater. I'll be talking about Paul's work versus Peter. Paul and Peter were both great apostles, and to choose between them is like choosing a milk chocolate Hershey bar and a cookies and cream Hershey bar. And every kid knows that's the hardest decision in the world. It's not about who's the worst, but who's the better. They both taught the gospel of Christ to hundreds of thousands of people. They taught the same message. Paul and Peter were very different. First, Paul taught mainly to those who were Gentiles. In those times, missionaries did not preach to Gentiles. Gentiles were considered unholy. Eating with Gentiles itself was against the custom, even if the food they picked was punitani's payasam or alfonso's barbecue. Paul did not believe that Gentiles were any different from Jews. Jesus' last commandment was to go out to the world and spread the gospel. Yet, many of the disciples did not want to teach the Gentiles because they were of what fellow Jews might think of them. But Paul did not hold back the good news to the Gentiles. Did you know it was in Antioch when Paul was preaching that Christians were first known as Christians? It's because Paul, we who were once Gentiles are now Christians. So how can you argue that Peter is greater? Secondly, Paul's way of preaching was different. To explain the difference, I will tell you a story. One day, Katie was working on her homework. So Lenny comes over and looks at it. All of a sudden, Lenny starts yelling at poor Katie. You're doing it wrong. Don't do it this way. You have to do it this. Of course, Katie won't listen, because who wants to listen when someone's yelling? But in the other hand, Maggie comes over and looks at the paper and starts to tell Katie how to do it gently, in a calm voice. Katie, of course, will follow it. Instead of yelling at people, Paul talked to the people in a nice way. He understood his audience and then spoke in a way they can relate to. In one incident, Paul was in the city of Athens. There, he was greatly distressed because the people worshipped all kinds of idols. He starts by saying, I see that you are all really religious. I even found an altar for an unknown God. I will tell you about the real God that is unknown to you. He spoke to the Gentiles the way you would talk to a friend. And this approach of his made people eager to listen to him, so thereby many turned into believers. At the same time, Paul also points out the wrong, no matter how important the person is. In Galatians 2:11, we see that Paul questions Peter when he was in the wrong. Paul accuses Peter of being a hypocrite because he acted differently to the Gentiles once a few men from James came to meet him. In verse 13, he tells how Peter's action can cause some to stumble. Paul, knowing that Peter was the leader of the apostles, still told him what he did was wrong. It was like that famous Tamil saying, to do such a thing was really hard, and I infer that you cannot accuse someone point blank unless you are in the right path. Thus, I can say with utter confidence that Paul was definitely a greater person than Peter. Finally, I want to point out what a protective and providing parent Paul was. Paul visited the countries he had been to or wrote letters to check on whether the congregation had grown. Paul did not let go of the people he converted. When first learning how to ride a bicycle, your parents help you. All of a sudden, if they let go, you will fall. Likewise were the people Paul converted into Christianity. He did not just pop in, say hello, please believe in Jesus Christ, leave and never come back. Paul did not stop keeping in contact with the people he converted. He wrote in letters of his preachings, which makes now most of the New Testament, and helped them during times of trouble. So overall, Paul is the best of the